afternoon's Nordo, yes, this Nordo that you're listening to right now, for the grand opening of the new TGK Tire and Auto in Arden Hills this Saturday, noon to 2. Enjoy free food, the Firestone Indy car, and giveaways including 10 free synthetic oil changes every half hour. TGK Tire and Auto in Arden Hills. Full details now, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Excited to do that Saturday, noon to 2. Excited to chat with Dan Hayes of The Athletic right now at Dan Hayes MLB via Twitter/X. You follow his work on theathletic.com, a New York Times property. And Dan Hayes joins me now. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm just enjoying a few days off here and just sitting on the couch for the first time in like months.
Oh, that sounds absolutely amazing. So you watched the All-Star game, and it was something. It's kind of well, not kind of. It's super cliche, but it came up this morning, and so I kind of went down the road of it. People have gone down this road millions of times. Totally get it, and it's ultimately there's never a true answer to it. But watching the All-Star game, there's nothing on the line. The enjoyment of getting to see guys maybe that you don't see at other points of the year, whether it's AL, NL, or just simply the fact that Major League Baseball has trouble platforming some of their best stars. But what did you think of the game last night?
Yeah, it was fine. Like it was still entertaining. Come on, Shohei hit a home run. That was awesome. I hate the uniforms. Like I just hate the uniforms. They looked so ugly. Bad softball teams have better uniforms. And I know there's movement with, one of our writers, Tyler Kepner, asked Commissioner yesterday, and I know it's not the biggest problem in baseball, but there is growing movement towards the possibility of future All-Star games where players just wear their jerseys to the game and maybe a common hat, something like that. I don't know what the deal will be, but maybe we get away from these generic, ugly uniforms. There have only been a few that have looked good. I like the Los Angeles ones a couple years ago with the black and the gold. But the product is okay. Like I liked the in-game interviews with players. It's difficult, I think, inside because that dome is louder and traps in noise.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it worked last night, but I think outdoor places that should be much easier, and those are enjoyable. I think when you have a Judge and Soto on the comms, or you have the Phillies with 3/4 of the infield and talking to each other. I really liked it a couple years ago when Nestor Cortez was telling people what pitch was going to come and all that stuff. So more of that, please. Maybe just better acoustics at future games, but it's okay. I mean, look. None of the All-Star games matter. The NBA All-Star game, nobody plays defense. NFL, half the league doesn't even play because everybody's focused on the Super Bowl and nobody cares. So All-Star games in general are generally kind of silly because you're never going to have anything on the line. So try and make them as most enjoyable as possible, and giving Shohei a pitch to hit and putting guys in the columns is probably the best way to do that.
Your most recent piece talking about kind of summing up the first half and just some takeaways from it, and the way that you kind of framed it up is we also have to weave in, sadly, the health related conversation of some of our most important pieces on this team. And so as you spend a couple of days chilling out on the couch, are you just you're drawing lots, you're taking straws and trying to decide, okay, am I most focused on this plantar fasciitis with Carlos Correa? Am I most focused on whether they're going to be back on Saturday and how long Royce Lewis will remain on the mend? How do you rank those in terms of, or maybe it's one grander conversation about the injury issues that have popped up in recent times with the club?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be shocked if Correa has to deal with plantar the rest of the year. It's just something that you deal with, and it's hard to get it to go away. The timing is good. It's for him to have 8 days off is pretty fortunate because we saw the way that he handled it last year when he came back from the IL stint in the postseason. The power wasn't necessarily there, but everything else was. And so Correa knowing how to manage it, this not being as bad of a case, at least initially, as it was last year, that's a good sign. he didn't leave the field, and that was good, although he was not very good on the field last year offensively. Defensively, he was great. The Twins were in a good way that way with him, but that's definitely a concern. Byron Buxton's elbow, I don't think is going to be that big of a deal. I get the sense that he was close on Sunday. So then it comes down to Royce Lewis, and that seemed like it was progressing well but obviously we haven't been home in 10 days. The last time we really saw talk to Royce was around July 4th or 5th. So we'll hear more when we get back, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a short injury. It's just that's going to be something they're going to have to keep an eye on a lot, because he had said that this injury, the adductor strain, was related to the quad strain, and it's because of the strength deficits in the leg that are there, that naturally are going to be there, because the quad, to fully recover 100%, a person, it takes a lot longer than 2 months, essentially. So Royce Lewis was trying to get back on the field and do what, athletes do and get back when they can be playable. He came back with strength deficit. So he's going to be dealing with that the rest of the year until he can get the quad 100% healthy in the off season. And get it is certainly at a point where it was playable and getting stronger. It's just, it had only healed and they were building up strength, essentially. It wasn't 100% on the strength part. So he'll deal with that kind of stuff, I think, the rest of the way. But I think, the Twins at least know that with both guys, and that's a better place to be. It's just, how much can that hamper them over the course of the year? The good part is they have so many guys now that are stepping up that, it can minimize what they do. Like, look, Royce Lewis went out, and the last time Royce Lewis went out, it was an absolute disaster. They went 6-13 in those first 19 games without him, because they won opening day with him, and they got off to a 7-13 start. They were terrible without him. This time around, they played much better. Brooks Lee's had a hand in that. Jose Miranda's had a hand in that. And his back soreness, I think, will be just fine after the break. You could see him being more mobile throughout the weekend in San Francisco. So, with 8 days off, he should be in pretty good shape too. So I think they are much better shape to handle all this stuff. But obviously, Correa and Lewis, those are big names, and you kind of want to make sure that they're doing good. So they may miss time over the course of the second half.
Hey, which of the 4 pitches that Willie Castro saw in last night's game were your favorite? It was cool to see Willie out there, right?
Yeah, that was awful. And I think there were a few teams that didn't get their guys in. Mariners didn't get their pitcher in, and the Angels didn't get their pitcher in. That part's not fun. Get everybody in, especially Correa was going to be the guy, then Correa sits out, and get everybody in. You got to do what you can. You're not playing to win, so get players in, and that part was a little disappointing.
But overall, found money this year, right? I mean, you can't tell the story of the first half and a team that is on pace to, as of now, win 5 or 6 more games even than they did last season. You can't tell that story without Willie Castro.
Oh, he's been, ever since he stepped in last year. I mean, last year was 30 steals and playing everywhere and a 3-win player. Not quite the average, and he wasn't hitting with power from the right side last year. He's found that power from the right side. We see it in the numbers this year, and he's actually got one more at bat this year than he did last year, and has more doubles, fewer homers, but overall the production is outstanding, and he's played everywhere on the field, and he is playing 5 positions with 20 games each. That's incredible. He will not get all 9. We've been told that. I don't think he'll ever play first base. I don't think he'll ever get all 9 in one game, but man, he is definitely a piece that they could not be doing this without.
Is there a way, as we move forward into the second half sprint, can we truly put the malaise of the first 20 behind us? It feels like this team has created enough traction, specifically offensively, to where what we've mostly seen from Miranda when he's healthy, Manny Margot making plays out in San Francisco, although we could have tried to keep young Yaz from that inside the park home run. But overall, offensively, I feel like the standard has been set where the 20 games of malaise followed now by 70 plus since, that they've brought themselves into the conversation of being one of the elite offensive run scoring teams in Major League Baseball. Yeah,
everybody in the lineup has found a way to heat up. Even Christian Vasquez had a good June and early July. I think when you look at the group and when you're looking at this team and saying, man, Max Kepler might be like our 7th or our 8th best hitter, that's a really good lineup because I think your top 5 are pretty clear. Lewis probably is 1, Correa is 2. Lee is in a conversation to be anywhere between 3, 4, and 5. Buxton with the slug is certainly up there, and Jose Miranda. Those are your top 5 guys pretty clearly offensively. And then you can still fit in a bunch of pieces around them because Larnach had a really good first half, and man, he stepped up to fill the void when Matt Wallner went down. Willie Castro's been really good. Carlos Santana, you look at his numbers since it's like an 850 plus OPS since April 21st. He looks rejuvenated, and the defense he plays over there. And that was funny because he had an uncharacteristic drop of a double play throw on Sunday. But, I mean, he's been outstanding and won them the game on Saturday with the home run. So, everywhere you look, there's a good hitter. And Ryan Jeffers had a great first 2 months, and then he kind of struggled massively the last 2 months. And if he can find any semblance of what he was before, this is a top 3 or 4 offense, and it's right now a top 4 offense. Like, this is the type of team you invest in, and go out and add a pitcher at the starting pitcher at the deadline, because this is the kind of offense that can hang with the other offenses. And we saw it. Look at the World Series last year. Texas and Arizona hit, and that's what really happened. And they wore teams down. Arizona was more contact-oriented and less power-oriented than the Twins team is. The Twins can hit the long ball, and as evidenced by that, 28 home runs game streak there that was the second longest in baseball history, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. Offense is down, and the Twins' offense is good this year. So it's the kind of team that will give other teams fits in the postseason if they get on a roll, and that's the type of team you invest in, I think.
Can you remind me quickly, with the Rangers last year en route to the title, it was 2 pitchers. I think it was it Montgomery and Eovaldi, where you're totally right. They were hitting, but the other end of that conversation is they had 2 guys that it didn't matter who you trotted out there. You weren't hitting on those guys. It was Eovaldi and Montgomery, right?
It was, and they had less of a bullpen than the Twins did. They had 3 guys who were on fumes. I like Leclerc, but Leclerc was on fumes. You really had him and Spores, and I can't even remember who the third guy was. But they were just on fumes as a pitching staff, and they banged their way to a title. And, you look at Arizona's team. They had, at the time, very little starting pitching themselves. They had Kelly, and they had, who's their ace? I can't remember. But they had 2 guys, essentially, and a bullpen. The Twins have potentially the nastiest bullpen that could be if they get all their health gone. Because, look, Duran, that 103.9 the other day was very encouraging. Griffin Jacks has been lights out. Alcala, I think I wrote the other day that Simeon Woods Richardson's the unsung hero just because of the innings he's provided, but Alcala's right there with him. He's been so huge. Brock Stewart's on the mend, really close game back. But, this is a team that could very easily put Chris Paddock to save some arm strength. They could put him in the bullpen. They could put Louis Varland in the bullpen. David Festa could end up back there. All guys that would be throwing upper 90s and making the bullpen depth huge. Like, this isn't a team that needs a whole lot at the deadline. They just need something to make sure that they get in the postseason and give themselves a shot. And I think that's probably a Reynolds starting pitcher.
Well, and I want to get into that with you briefly. Dan Hayes covers the Twins for The Athletic, at Dan Hayes via the X Machine, at Dan Hayes MLB, excuse me. That's his handle. Follow him, theathletic.com. If you take him out, now, adding to pitching is going to be fantastic, and I don't want to make this sound like it's the perfect roster. But who are you removing from the mix if you add, for instance, Saturdays with Sauce? We don't talk about the 7th name on the list, we talk about things like, hey, Max Scherzer, final year of his deal, only making $12.5 million this year. So you trade for him at the deadline and suddenly 12.5 is like 5 or 6. That'd be sweet, right? So, whether it's Scherzer or whoever, if you're adding to the mix, who's a guy that you're starting to think about, like the Chris Paddock project, Simeon Woods Richardson. You certainly wouldn't want to mess not only with his development, but the fact that I think that he's been above average this far, pretty much stabilized. Do you start to play down, because if you're going to add somebody, you got to start having that conversation or that thought process of if he's in, somebody's out. Have you looked at that at all?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know how they want to handle Paddock in the second half because we're still talking about a guy who came off the IL and had his second Tommy John, and he's already thrown, 88 in the third innings, which not a lot of guys in the league with 2 Tommy Johns. So his last huge workload was, going back to 2019 because he gets hurt. 2021 he threw 108 in the third innings, but I mean, 2019 was 140 and 2/3 innings. That's his career high. So,
yeah,
are they going to want to manage him? I would think they do. And there was some encouraging signs the last 2 starts. They came back, and he didn't get hit too hard. One of those runs is on that defense, leave him out there a little too long, but he's solid. And for a number 5, I think you can live with him because I know he's got 4.99 ERA, but his metrics suggest he's a much better pitcher than that. He's like a 4.2 ERA. If you had a 4.2 ERA in your 5th spot, you're feeling pretty good about life. But then again, I think you still need to manage him. So you need another arm to come in, and I don't know that you can necessarily. He's got 1 year left. There's still a relationship there. But also, would they ever consider putting him in a trade? And, that next year is really cheap for whatever team would be acquiring him back. That team could then manage him. They have to think about different things without question, because I think you're pretty set with Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Bailey Ober. And like you said, Simeon Woods Richardson has been very good for them. So you don't want to mess with that too much, but shifting him down to 5, just getting an extra arm in the mix, I think is a good plan. Maybe you give Paddock time with every start and space out his starts. I don't know how you do it. It's going to be a challenge, but these are the things you want to do because honestly, at this point in the year, I don't think you think about feelings. You've got a good team. You've got to kind of go for it and put those aside.
Couple more for you here, Dan. And you mentioned going for it and, trade deadline. This is a front office that happens to yield to an ownership group where they went at the trade deadline for something a couple of years ago. They don't make the playoffs. They don't do much, if anything. I don't remember them making a move at the deadline last year or breaking playoff droughts and those sorts of things. It's very difficult for me to even fathom a situation in which that go for it way that you're mentioning this. And I'm with you, man. I want them to go for it. I just don't see that happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. The results of 2022 wipe out the fact that they did go for it, though. I mean, you've seen them go for it. You saw them go for it 2 years ago. Tyler Mahle, that was a huge investment. Jorge Lopez was an all-star closer. He was an all-star closer at the time. They went out and got him, and then they got Fulmer on top of it. Now, none of those names was sexy, and I guess it depends on what your definition of go for it is, because I think if they went out and got, say, Yusei Kikuchi from Tampa or Toronto, and they add a number 3 starter, that's going for it to me. I don't think they need to go get Max Scherzer. I don't think first of all, Max Scherzer, last year, Texas was trying to count on him, and he was hurt, and he has not been right for a couple of years. I don't know that there's that guy out there that's like that, that's like, oh, let's go get Randy Johnson or Kevin Brown, that ace. I think there's... Well, those guys
don't pitch anymore, Dan.
What's that?
Those guys don't pitch anymore, Dan. Why would they get them?
Yes. No, you're correct.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
2 years ago, they did go for it. They put a lot. Did. It cost them a lot to go get Tyler Mahle, who broke down, and that was unfortunate, and cost them a lot to get Jorge Lopez, and who was just not there in a lot of ways. And they need to get better is really what has to happen. They have to hit their target.
So as we're looking at things, as they're trying to get better, are these Guardians going to tail off? I mean, they kind of limp their way to the All-Star break. Like, where do you see this team fitting into the AL mix right now? Baltimore slim, but albeit an advantage in the East. Yankees look to be the Yankees. I mean, you've probably done this, whether it's the 20 games to start the season and the games since. We were talking about offensive numbers growing. You can also play that game in terms of look at the Twins' records against teams that aren't the Dodgers, Yankees, or Orioles or Guardians, right? So second half sprint and all of that. Are the Guardians slowing down? Are we going to get nipped by these Royals at our coattails right now? The AL West in general kind of looks down, but still murky. Like, what's the AL look like and the Twins and their position within it?
Yeah, if the Twins are healthy, if these issues subside, look, they're going to push the Guardians. It'll be a really interesting race. The Guardians are having a great year. We have seen some of their key guys start to slow down a little bit, which is expected. Some regression. They were playing outstanding, and you're right, they did limit it to the break. That bullpen's going to play the whole way, though. That bullpen's amazing, and Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor are not going anywhere. So even if they fade, they gave themselves a nice little cushion to give them, a little bit of breathing room here. But the Royals are going to need a lot to go right the rest of the way, and they, the one thing that the Royals, they're thin. They just don't have the depth that I think the Twins do, because the Royals aren't rolling out guys like Brooks Lee and Austin Martin and all that kind of stuff if they have injuries. So can Salvador Perez hold up? I don't know. If I was going to bet on it, I would say that I think the Twins can do it. It's just going to be tight, but I honestly don't care as long as they're in. I think that as long as they're in, they got as good of a shot as anybody. And, it'll be interesting when they run into the Yankees, but no team is perfect in this thing. And the Yankees were red hot when the Twins got them. Look at Carlos Rodon now. Look at Luis Gil now, those two pitchers who were very good when the Yankees played the Twins, and they've had rough Junes and Julys. They're terrible right now. There's no real perfect team. The Dodgers, look at the bottom of their lineup. They're a very good 1 through 6. Their 7, 8, 9 is not good. And so I don't think there's any perfect team out there. And when you have a chance, you just need to get hot at the right time. And I think the Twins learned a little about themselves last October by how they played, and then they kind of wilted in games 3 and 4 against Houston, but they had a shot at Houston. And man, if you'd let that bullpen be in that postseason, that would have been really interesting. So, it's a good time to be optimistic about these guys, and just have a last fun 65 games, 66 games, whatever it is.
Hey, let me ask you this. When you're doing mailbags or anything, I wonder how often you're asked about Trevor Bauer, because over the course of our conversation here, adding people to the deadline, et cetera, and every time we talk about the Twins, I get asked about Trevor Bauer. Now, there was the event that took place when he was back with the Dodgers, I believe. He was ultimately cleared of that.
Nobody's touching him. Nobody's touching him.
So there's got to be a referendum on, is he just an awful dude? Like, it's pretty obvious no team in the league is.
Yeah, no, you know what? We're not. Honestly, I don't want to discuss him, to be honest. He's not going to pitch in baseball. If somebody was going to sign him, they would have signed him by now. He's an awful dude. He's had his there was a lot of stuff. I know he didn't get anything. I know he didn't get in trouble in the courts, but Major League Baseball is well aware, has a thick file on him, and he would be on a team. Think about how many teams are desperate for pitching. He would be on a team if there was reason to have him.
No,
so, I mean, it's not somebody that anybody should be addressing, honestly, because the teams are so starved for pitching.
Yeah,
and he's offered to pitch for the minimum. So it's just not going to happen.
Well, that's been my instinct on it. Other teams, everyone knows he's out there, and if somebody wants him, they can get him, and nobody has. So there must be a reason behind that. Very last thing for you, and then I'll let you get on to enjoy your remaining days of chill before the Brewers come to town. But it is about the Brewers. What's good about the Brew Crew is we get a little border battle here. I know they're atop the NL Central. So they're feeling good about themselves. What about the Brew Crew at Target Field starting Saturday?
It should be a lot of fun. I mean, when is it not? So it's my 7th year here, and all I've gathered is that Minnesotans don't like Wisconsinites, and Wisconsinites don't like Minnesotans. You get 2 days. Unfortunately, it's only 2 days. I think next year these rivalry series are going to go back to 3 games, which is great because you get a little more chance at flavor. And I hate that Friday's off and that we're just there Saturday, Sunday. But they've been playing great. You know, everybody thought they were going to lose Craig Counsell and fall apart, but there's some really talented players. Jackson Churio, the rookie, is very good. Christian Yelich, we've seen the numbers. He's been awesome. A team that traded Corbin Burns is still running away with the NL Central, and it should be loud and fun and packed for the 2 games this weekend. So it'll be definitely an interesting way to start the second half and just get going right away, because that's the kind of thing that revs your motor up right away, is a packed house with teams that don't like each other, or fan bases that don't like each other, and that's a good way to wake up out of the break.
Hey, thanks for all you do, and appreciate every time you're able to join 9 to noon, and looking forward to hearing or reading your work at The Athletic and following you via X. If I can't watch the Twins game because it's not on TV, so I need you to tell me what's going on.
Absolutely, and yeah, hopefully there's some national games on later in the year that you get to see. So that'd be a good way to end the year.
All right, party on. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thank you. That's Dan Hayes, covers the Twins for The Athletic at Dan Hayes MLB via X. It's Nordo in for PA 9 to noon, cash contest, and a couple segments to go. Final hour on The Fan.
The Fan and BigTech.com. I'm going to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand at the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com, enter the keyword money for this hour. Keyword money, KFAN.com, keyword man.
Thanks to Dan Hayes for joining 9 to noon. I got some text messages and a couple of emails when I asked him about Trevor Bauer. Dan Hayes was very immediate and very assertive about the fact that just wasn't a thing that is even going to be remotely possible. And I have to admit that it piques my curiosity. I was telling one of the text messengers, I responded to it because he asked, what about Trevor Bauer? And it's true. Every time we're talking about the Twins, how to get better, and we're having, specifically as it pertains to money conversations, Trevor Bauer is a name that exists. At one point, a fairly high-end pitcher in Major League Baseball. And there was the event that took place out in L.A. He was ultimately freed of any wrongdoing from a legal perspective. I think he's pitching overseas. He might be doing that now. As a matter of fact, I haven't followed Trevor Bauer, and I haven't looked into anything about his background. But the reason that I've been typically hesitant to bring it up is, I'll be honest, via off-air conversations and text messages and just, again, piquing my curiosity. What about Trevor? This is not an indictment of Dan at all. Dan's a terrific reporter, but I'm just merely noting that is the common refrain and the common response that I'm getting. It's not just, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, or yeah, there are some character concerns. People still want to learn more about, framed or acquitted or, not legally responsible, etc. They just want to learn more about it. It's immediate. The door slams shut. He's a terrible person, and kind of alluding to, it's kind of the you wouldn't believe what you haven't heard kind of vibe regarding Trevor Bauer. But in the end, based on, but to all of that, kind of shutting that door, and it's not just Dan. I've talked to at least 3 other people that have all had, a couple of them exactly the same, but all kind of a similar response. What, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? I don't even want to talk about him. No, it's not happening. But the key point to it, with him in particular, is that we do live in our Minnesota fishbowl. So it's, how do we make the Twins better? How do we make our run? How do we go for it? And I loved, what Dan had to say about going for it up to the deadline, potentially adding a pitcher. I'm with him in that response. It's why I brought up the Rangers, Montgomery, Eovaldi. Love that we're hitting the heck out of the ball now. But ultimately, being able to, in the Rangers case, they go too deep. Bullpen isn't as good as the Minnesota Twins were, But really, ultimately, if you had to get Montgomery or Eovaldi twice in the series, you just weren't winning the series. And we watched that as they won the whole thing last year. Now I think Montgomery's in Arizona, and he's hideous this year. So, but they got what they needed out of him. But I'm thinking about how does the pitching get better? Lopez needs to, and Pablo needs to get better on his end of things. Joe Ryan statistically has kind of been the most stable and best pitcher overall. But if Lopez is in gear, then he's certainly the 1A or the ace of this staff, and that bullpen's absolutely locked down. But every time hey, what about Trevor? It's probably not going to cost him. Talking about Scherzer and back end of his career, that's a big name thing. He mentioned a couple other names that I hadn't heard of. Again, got to be watching more All-Star games. Got to learn more of some of these players. That's my mistake. But every time that Trevor Bauer's name has been uttered, it is immediately, no, thank you. Don't mention his name ever again. He is awful. And but to that pressure point, every team in Major League Baseball is thinking about how they get better in the month of July. You have the hot stove season of things and the conversations in the off season. No team will touch Trevor Bauer with a foul pole length arm. They are not interested in him, which kind of piques my curiosity. I want to know just how awful this person is. I don't know. I don't get it. But clearly, if no organization in Major League Baseball is interested in even taking a flyer on this person, even taking and even having to prop him up in front of a microphone in front of the respective team's local press to answer questions on anything. And ultimately, as fan bases can be very forgiving once games are played. They are not willing to even go that route. So, as we enter trade deadline season, I suppose we could just cross him off the list. I suppose we could put that one to bed, that he will not be an option as we enter the trade deadline. I know that Brett Blakemore's Braves, they're not going to sign him.
I don't think so.
And apparently now the Minnesota Twins and every other organization in Major League Baseball, none of them will be signing him either. So thanks again to Dan. Outlook for the Twins, get healthy, keep mashing, and find a way maybe over the next month, to Dan's point, in the effort of going for it. Doesn't have to be that star power name, but getting somebody to solidify maybe that third spot in the rotation. Love Simeon, Woods, Richardson. Sure, Ober's doing his thing. But if you can push that down the line a little bit and get somebody to work in the mix with Joe and Pablo, now we are freaking talking. Love that. Final segment around the corner, 9 to noon. Final segment, 9 to noon. Thank you so much. Kind of an athletic bent to the show today with Alec Lewis opening the show, covering the Minnesota Vikings 10 days from the first practice at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. A week from Saturday, Saucy and I will be out there on the perch. Pumped for that. And then Dan Hayes to kick off this hour with Twins-related conversation. The Twins returning from the All-Star break, hosting the Brewers starting on Saturday. Tomorrow, 9 to noon, pump for it. Voice of the Howl, Alan Horton's going to be in studio at 9. Wolves Summer League in play, so he's local, but he's covering everything. And a great opportunity to kind of dig into it. Brett, you had mentioned earlier on that there's a new documentary of sorts coming out that will be following Anthony Edwards. And so from quarterback with Kirk, from receiver with JJ, to ultimately, I mean, that's going to be the most entertaining bit, I think, is going to be Ant on that stage. That's going to be super sweet. And so kind of talking about that, but the stage that he's entering now in the offseason, we're paying attention to Terrence Shannon Jr., but we're also keeping our eyes on maybe the next dream team incarnation with Anthony Edwards trying to make some plays with the Olympic team in Paris. So looking forward to that. He's in studio at 9 o'clock. Ben Lieber will be in studio tomorrow, breaking down just what he's looking forward to at camp. And I thought Alec did it well, but you can bounce through your head 5 or 6 things immediately in terms of what you want to see. Again, in terms of projections, we've spent all summer talking about it. Post-draft, just thinking about how this thing comes together, the defense potentially being better, the worrisome look in terms of just plugging pieces into the mix, both on the offensive interior and defensive interior, those respective lines. The run game for me, handled that earlier in the show. That is outside of, you need Sam Darnold to do his thing. You need to develop the rookie out of Michigan. But the run game just has to be respected at a base level. Just a small amount of respect that can make an opposing defense think, even if for a split second. It needs to be respected. We got to make this running attack respected again. So Lieber in studio, and then really excited to meet Gophers running back Darius Taylor. Darius Taylor is going to be in studio. It was funny, I mentioned it with Parker Fox yesterday, just kind of looking at the schedules, and it's just odd in the Big Ten, and we'll get used to it. This is, short-term issues, but just kind of the idea of looking at the Gophers football schedule this upcoming season and the fact that they're hosting the Trojans in October. The next week, they're at the Bruins. And I don't think, neither Oregon nor Washington are in the mix on that schedule. But Washington, you just think about how the Big Ten is changing. Thinking about if you're Rutgers, and Rutgers has to, in late October, go to USC. Those sorts of just thinking about how cross-country this Big Ten, this regional conference has really expanded to is going to be interesting. But getting to know Darius Taylor and then also Blake Barrett's Institute for Athletes is going to be in studio along with them. So pumped to talk to those guys tomorrow. And then looking ahead, the Friday feast, vocal maintenance days here. The host is final stretch vocal maintenance days before training camp lifts off next week. Certainly looking forward to having him back. But in the meantime, a Friday football feast with Paul Charchian, where probably talk about camping, probably talk about walking trails, probably talk about board games. There might be, he's really mad. We've had to deal with some adjustments, Brett, in terms of, music and things like that in the last few months. You know who's pissed about it? It's Paul Charchian because of the turbo tracks.
Oh, yeah.
He's a little down about that. Now,
gone too soon.
I have an idea as to how we might fix that, but you'll have to wait until Friday to dig into that. But it's a Friday football feast. I've had a blast filling in for PA. Excited to hear his stories and his travels from a week off. How does he handle his vacation days, other than apparently incessantly texting Alec Lewis? Found that out earlier today. But I appreciate you listening to The Fan. The program is next, and we'll chat again at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you to Brett. This is The Fan. Have a great afternoon.
Wow, wasn't that fun?
You're breaking up, Bob.
You're breaking up.
The game is over. Ooh!
Podcast today's Paul Allen Show, or listen back to previous show and interviews by going to the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.com.